Hello, and welcome to the CurioClips channel. Before we get to the juicy stuff, why don't we refresh your memory on how our favorite hominids came into being? We all know that humans didn't just magically appear in the world fully formed like Athena from Zeus's head, but that doesn't mean we have a clear understanding of exactly what happened over the course of millions of years that led us to become us. So let's talk about it. If you want to start at the very beginning, you've got to go back a long way. Somewhere between 8 million and 6 million years ago, somewhere in Africa, a population of great apes split off from the other apes. This included chimpanzees, bonobos, gorillas, and orangutans. What set them apart? They were bipeds, meaning they walked upright on two legs. Today, we call these early ancestors of ours Australopithecines. One of the most famous members of this group is Australopithecus afarensis, which includes the famous Lucy fossil. These early humans had a brain size of around 400 to 500 cubic centimeters, roughly a third smaller than modern humans. In terms of height, they would have been around the same height as today's chimps. But because they walked upright, their center of gravity would have been higher, making them more likely to topple over. However, they also had much longer arms than we do, which gave them more leverage for walking. And of course, their hands and feet evolved over time to compensate for the change in center of gravity. While there has been some debate about whether or not they used tools, the current consensus is that they did, including butchering animal carcasses and eating the meat. Some even speculate that they may have lived in groups, which would have helped them hunt larger prey and protect themselves from predators. So now that you're caught up on all of that, let's move on to the good part. There are lots of theories as to why our ancestors split off from the other apes and started evolving separately. All of them involve some combination of climate change and food shortage, forcing our ape-like ancestors to start walking on two legs instead of four. After all, when there's not enough food to go around, you want to be able to use your hands for gathering as well as walking. Others say that perhaps the forest was becoming more open and there weren't as many trees to hang from. So our ancestors had to find another way to adapt. Either way, eventually they split off from the other apes, and we never really see them again. Where did they go? Well, it depends on what you think happened next. The oldest human ancestor we know of after the Australopithecines is Homo habilis, which means handyman in Latin. According to the traditional view, Homo habilis evolved directly from Australopithecus afarensis, specifically a female of the species who had a child with a Homo habilis male. This may seem weird to you, but keep in mind that interbreeding between species is pretty common in the animal kingdom today. It's actually thought to be responsible for traits in modern humans that we didn't used to have, such as immunity to certain diseases. Anyway, Homo habilis lived between 2.3 and 1.6 million years ago and is considered the first true human. Why? Because they had bigger brains than the Australopithecines, and they also developed more sophisticated tools. They also stood around 4 feet tall, so they were closer to modern human height than the previous species. Most importantly, though, is that they showed up in the fossil record in East Africa and then seemingly vanished after 700,000 years. Where did they go? Well, one theory is that they simply died out. However, another theory proposes that they didn't go anywhere. They just evolved into the next species, Homo erectus. And here is where things get tricky, because there are different ideas about how this went down depending on whether you re-team traditional view or team out of Africa. The traditional view holds that Homo erectus evolved in Africa and migrated out to the rest of the Old World. Team out of Africa, on the other hand, believes that Homo erectus evolved in Africa from Homo habilis and then migrated out into the rest of the Old World, where they evolved into other species of archaic humans such as Neanderthals and Denisovans. Under this model, there wouldn't have been any interbreeding between Homo habilis and Homo erectus. Instead, they would have been completely separate evolutionary lineages. What makes Team out of Africa more attractive is that the fossil record shows a striking similarity between Homo habilis and Homo erectus. They were about the same height and weight, and they had similar brain sizes. Of course, if there was no interbreeding, that would have to mean that Homo erectus somehow managed to evolve all of those traits twice. That seems unlikely, though. To be fair, Team Traditional View says that the reason they look so similar is that Homo erectus actually did evolve in Africa from Homo habilis. They just didn't stay there. Okay, so if you believe in the traditional view, The next step in the story takes us to Europe and Asia, where Homo erectus arrived sometime before 1.8 million years ago. There they interbred with the local population of Homo ergaster and produced the next species in line, Homo antecessor. Yes, really, that's what they named it. Homo heidelbergensis evolved into Homo sapiens and Neanderthals. Meanwhile, Homo ergaster evolved into Homo erectus in Africa, and the two species remained separate until Homo sapiens evolved. Then they all kind of got together and had kids. The result us. But wait a minute. If Homo sapiens evolved from Homo heidelbergensis in Europe, that means that we wouldn't have left Africa until much later, right? Nope. Not according to Team Out of Africa. They say that we actually left the continent 100,000 years before Homo sapiens did, thanks to the help of Homo neanderthalensis, who showed up in Europe by 440,000 years ago and stayed there for hundreds of thousands of years. As for Homo florensis, well, they evolved in Southeast Asia around 1 million years ago and hung out there for quite some time. They didn't go extinct until 50,000 years ago, which is pretty recent in terms of evolution. By the way, during all of this, Homo sapiens evolved in Africa around 300,000 years ago, stuck there until around 70,000 years ago when they finally made their way out into the world. They met up with all of their cousins and, well, you know what happened next. Today, genetic testing reveals that the vast majority of people outside of Africa have around 4% Neanderthal DNA and around 6% Denisovan DNA, which means that we totally did the horizontal gene transfer thing with both species before they went extinct. We still don't know the exact percentage of Neanderthal DNA found in the genomes of people who live in Africa today, but it should be lower since they had less contact with Eurasian populations. But hold on. There's even more to the story because there's another hominin candidate on the block. In 2010, a skull was found in Siberia that changed everything. It belonged to a young woman who lived around 20,000 years ago. She wasn't a Neanderthal, nor a Denisovan, nor a Homo sapien, but something else entirely. We still don't have a name for her species because she could have been a member of either one of them. It's possible that she was a hybrid of two of the three. This isn't the only evidence of interbreeding either. A boy from southern Siberia who lived 20,000 years ago was discovered to have Neanderthal, Denisovan, and Homo sapiens DNA. Basically, all of the hominin species that were alive at the time were mixing it up. Even a young woman who lived in what is now Israel 100,000 years ago was found to have Denisovan ancestry, proving that they were in the Middle East, not just Siberia. So what does this mean for the dreamy story? Well, it suggests that we need to throw out the whole neat and tidy narrative that we've been told for decades and embrace the beautiful messiness of reality. Who knows? Maybe someday we'll even find the remains of an actual hobbit, and we can add yet another layer of awfulness to this already ridiculous story. In the meantime, though, I think it's safe to say that the truth is stranger than fiction. Thanks for watching this episode, which was brought to you with the help of our patrons. If you'd like to help us make more videos about all sorts of topics, you can go to our support page to learn more.